The city of Newark, Ohio seems almost indistinguishable when compared to most sizable towns found in the American Midwest. It contains much of the same qualities found in many cities in Ohio. An old Richardsonian Romanesque jail, a repurposed train station, a traditionally decorated county courthouse set in a public square. But looking a little closer reveals a deep history. A golf course weaves through an ancient mass of American Indian earthworks. A local wedding venue sits inside a neoclassical post office. And on a corner plot along the downtown strip surrounding the courthouse is a building unlike any other. It is hard to know what is most unusual about this building. From its strange green-gray hue to the decorative border framing the details of the facade. And who could ignore the intricate organic detailing? However, the first thing to grab your attention is likely to be the large, colorful mosaic above the door, proudly proclaiming the name of the building, the Old Home. If you squint at the bottom corner of this mosaic, you might just be able to make out the name of the architect behind this gem. Louis Sullivan is one of the most famous true American architects. While not the inventor, he could certainly be called the pioneer of modern skyscraper design. His unique style of ornamentation set a standard for early skyscraper design, and allowed his designs to be recognized instantly. Sullivan enjoyed a successful career in the 1880s and 90s, receiving many high-profile commissions across Chicago while working with his partner, Dankmar Adler. In 1890, Sullivan was commissioned to create a building for the World Columbian Exposition. While Sullivan's design received recognition from Europe, it stood out from the rest of the fair's Beaux-Arts style. Sullivan's distaste for the Beaux-Arts was well known, but the general public disagreed, as it had become the prevailing style of the time. This, in combination with the Panic of 1893, led to the slow decline of Sullivan and Adler's practice, culminating in their practice breaking up in 1894. Sullivan continued practicing on his own for another 22 years, struggling financially due to sparse opportunities. During this time, he began to accept smaller and cheaper commissions. In 1908, Sullivan received a commission for a small local bank in Owatonna, Minnesota. While much smaller than his more high-profile projects, the bank still featured his signature style. This was the first of 8 banks designed at the end of his career. Our building in Newark was the 6th. These came to be known as his jewel box banks, due to their small size and ornate facades. When Sullivan showed photos of his quaint commissions to Frank Lloyd Wright, a former student of his, Wright was disappointed. He described them as only pitiful remnants of the great genius that flashed from him in the old days. Indeed, many critics found these tiny buildings to fail to live up to the name of the man who brought such renown to the American skyscraper. As time has gone on, more and more people are recognizing these buildings not as the dying breath of an old master, but the last hurrah of the style that Sullivan created. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back to 1913. This was the year when the commission for the Newark Bank was made. A young banker named Emmett Bauer had been planning to construct a new building to house his bank, the Home Building Association. At this point, he had already acquired a site for the bank on the corner of North 3rd and West Main, across from the county courthouse. All that remained was finding a way to make his bank stand out. Around this time, Bauer read an article about the bank Sullivan had built in Owatonna, Minnesota. In it, the bank's owner praised the design of the building, showing such satisfaction that Bauer knew immediately that Sullivan was the man to design his bank. As luck would have it, Sullivan had no commissions the previous year, and only 3 presently, also for small Midwestern banks. His need for work meant that it was more likely he would be willing to accept the proposed commission. By March of 1914, he was announced publicly as the architect on the project, and the building was open only a year later. The majority of Sullivan's jewel box banks were designed under a unified philosophy. They were to be sympathetic with the towns they were situated in. This meant they were of similar height and scale to the surrounding buildings. On the inside, they glowed with the light from skylights and stained glass windows. The vault remained open during business hours and sat prominently behind the tellers. These were not the traditional Greek temples most banks imitated. In most cases, they were made of a red-brown brick and a single double-height floor. This is where the Newark Bank differs. Due to its small plot, it required 2 stories and a basement to fit in the offices required and the open public floor desired. Unlike the other banks where the brick reflected the agrarian community, the old home used a green-gray terracotta, partially to create a dialogue with the courthouse's gray limestone, but also to reflect the prominent glass industry in Newark. Interestingly, parts of the building were originally planned to be made of a similar brick to the surrounding buildings, but this was changed during construction. This was also only the second of his banks to include exterior mosaics, and the first to use them in such a prominent way. On the evening of August 24th, 1915, the building was officially opened up to the public. The bank received positive local and national recognition upon its opening, leading to a prosperous decade for Emmett Bauer. In 1928, due to an increase in new business, Bauer created the Union Trust Company, housed in the same building. New signage was put up over top of the original mosaics. This would be the first of many alterations over the years. Fortunately, the new signs were hung on top of the old mosaics rather than replacing them. These stayed in place until 1978, meaning the mosaics were kept in relatively excellent condition. In 1942, a merger with the Licking County Bank meant that they needed larger facilities, moving into a different building. It was at this time that the Sullivan building was sold to a local contractor named William Camlin. Due to the economy of World War II, Camlin was reserved to renting the first floor to a sanitary meat market. In 1946, the building got another new client, this time a jewelry store. This was when the most extreme changes were made to the building. On the inside, the teller's benches were removed and a drop ceiling was added. The first floor windows were expanded to create display windows, breaking the ornate framing around the southern facade. The most extreme change, however, was made to the entrance. The corner of the building was cut to provide entry from the corner. This alteration marred both facades of the buildings, but would not have been so offensive had a large, undecorated steel column not been placed in the corner to support the weakened structure. The building continued to age over the years, the cost of renovations increasing with each passing moment. The building passed hands several times, serving as a loan office, architectural firm, apartment, and lastly an ice cream parlor. In 2007, the old home was purchased by Stephen and Joanne Jones. The couple were keen on renovating the building, and in 2013, donated it to the Licking County Foundation. After almost 100 years, the building had finally transferred hands to a group who had both the intention and the means to restore the crumbling building. While the Licking County Foundation was certainly more well-equipped to complete renovations than previous owners, they were not well-versed in the renovation and preservation of historic structures. The foundation mostly serves as a charitable organization that raises and distributes funds to the benefit of Licking County and its residents. This was the first time that they had been presented with a problem such as this. They began by finding an architecture firm to help them with the renovations. They selected Rogers Krajnak Architects, a firm located in nearby Columbus. I was fortunate enough to get in contact with one of the firm's principals in order to find out more about how the restoration is progressing and what challenges come with restoring a 100-year-old building.
My name is Daryl Rogers. I'm a principal at Rogers Krajnak Architects, and I was the principal in charge on the Louis Sullivan building in Newark.
My first question was, how did their firm get selected for this project?
We went through an interview process with the Licking County Foundation, and they selected our firm based on our interview and our relevant experience for this type of work.
Architectural restoration is a very specific subsection of work, and I was interested to learn what led the firm to taking on these types of projects.
Personally, I've always been a true student of architectural history. When I was at the Ohio State University studying architecture, I enjoyed the architectural history courses as much as the design studios. And then as an architect who started our own firm, we seem to gravitate towards these significant historic building renovations, restoration projects. It's part of me personally, but as a practice, it's become a real focus for Rogers Krajnak.
The firm has done a lot of work on many historic municipal buildings around Ohio, including a preliminary conceptual study for the courthouse directly across from the Sullivan building. When it comes to buildings with such a long and storied history as this, it can be a challenge just to know where to start.
The challenge of understanding the actual condition of the building, the building had sat vacant for many years and had been changed and modified by previous owners in some pretty negative ways. So understanding the actual condition of the building envelope, what kind of damage had been done, and the challenge of finding out what original was still there versus which original items have been removed or damaged beyond repair. That's always the most challenging aspect of working with historic buildings.
Ultimately, it begins where all projects begin.
Documenting the existing conditions and then devising a good approach and a very thorough and detailed approach for each type of restoration or renovation work that needed to be done. We were dealing with multiple unique materials such as terracotta, mosaic tile, leaded glass windows, elements where we had specific team members with experience, but how we put it all together and figure out a strategy for the overall project was quite challenging and took a while because of the significant nature and history of this building.
The first thing that needed to be done after their assessment was stabilization of the exterior. At this time, the ceiling was leaking and many of the windows were not airtight. This was phase 1 of the project and began in June of 2015. However, there was something more pressing just around the corner. The city of Newark had just begun work on a renovation project of their own, this time on the city streets and sidewalks around the downtown area. For most projects, this wouldn't have been an issue. However, in Sullivan's attempt to maximize the area of the site, he had extended the basement out underneath the public way. This meant that the city's construction would expose the basement to the elements directly. While originally this was a big concern for the project, it was really a blessing in disguise. Many of the steel beams that supported the structure above the basement were in bad shape, and this offered the opportunity to replace them. It also allowed the team to completely redo the waterproofing to keep the basement dry. While all of this was going on, the team was working hard at planning the restoration of the exterior facades. One of the hard things when restoring significant buildings like this, the old home was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1973, is attempting to restore the original condition. Fortunately, the full set of construction documents of the building survive in the Art Institute of Chicago's collection. However, when dealing with outdated materials, it can be hard to replicate the original handiwork.
I mean, when you look at the exterior restoration, it's all about terracotta, as we kept telling ourselves and telling our team members. Pretty early in the process, we were working with a foundation who ended up giving us a grant for this project. And they suggested that we talk with a firm in Chicago called West Jenny Elsner, which is a really well-known and nationally and internationally recognized forensics and engineering firm. They focus on a lot of building envelope restoration and repair. So we started talking with them about joining our team as a consultant. We do a bit about terracotta, but they have people that actually focus on that. And we met an engineer from that firm named Brett Lauries. So when we brought him onto the team in his firm, we had the ability to really understand the proper restoration techniques for terracotta. And he was a great team member through the entire process, working with us from the early concepts of how to restore, what needs to be restored versus replaced, and then developed a really good set of construction documents in coordination with us. And during construction, he was invaluable when he came for site visits and gave us his insight.
One of the most difficult logistic challenges was getting the money to actually complete the restoration. Being only a local charitable organization, the Licking County Foundation had no way of raising the millions of dollars the project was going to cost from typical donations alone. While donations from the public were a great help, they really needed help from a larger organization. They first sought to get state historic tax credit, but this process was very strict on its requirements. And while it meant the group was eligible for federal tax credits, it ultimately failed at the state level due to the financial impact of the project being too small. Looking elsewhere for help, they found it almost 400 miles away in Janesville, Wisconsin. This is the home of the Jeffers Family Foundation. This group was made for this exact purpose, helping fund the restoration of smaller historic structures in the Midwest. Thanks to this group, $2.25 million were raised to help jumpstart the exterior restoration, which wrapped up last fall. Once the exterior was well on its way, the team was able to shift its focus towards the interior. From the start, the Licking County Foundation had no plans to move into the smaller space. So there arose the question of how would the space be used?
The goal from the Licking County Foundation's standpoint all along was that the building should serve some kind of community purpose. So it was early in the process when they were having behind-the-scenes discussions with some folks in the Licking County area, different organizations that could become a tenant in the building, and they landed on one that I thought was the perfect fit for this project. It's Explore Licking County, which is the Convention and Visitors Bureau of Licking County. They were brought in early on as a potential tenant, and then as conversations developed, it became official they would become the tenant of the building. And I feel like it's a perfect fit because they saw the benefit of having the first floor banking hall as an open community space that they would use, but it would also be open for other community activities. And their office requirements perfectly fit within the second floor, which was always the banking offices from the original use. And just symbolically having the Convention and Visitors and Welcoming organization of Licking County be in a landmark piece of architecture in the heart of downtown Newark really feels good, and I think it results in a great fit for the building, and I think the community and visitors alike will enjoy having that organization in the building.
With a new tenant acquired, plans began to turn towards how the banking hall would be presented and restored. The upper walls featured elaborate murals, and while most of these murals will be fully restored, the back wall will feature a gradient of restoration, showcasing the cleaning and repainting process. Because the main floor will serve multiple functions, the furniture will be able to be rearranged. Informative displays mimic the style of the original furniture. The floor will feature an inlaid pattern where the original teller's stands were. My personal favorite detail is a small light rail suspended in the air, mimicking the original light rail that illuminated the teller's benches. While the details of the interior were coming along, a bigger problem began to become clear.
The original building is on a very small site. It's a corner lot, and Louis Sullivan, I think, even had challenges with fitting the program in. The original bathrooms were always in the lower basement level because of this. There just wasn't any other space. And programmatically, for this project that we're working on, accessibility is now a requirement for buildings that we design. Louis Sullivan wasn't dealing with that issue. So the challenge of having a building that's open to the public that has bathrooms in the basement, how do you get to the bathrooms was a question. Well, of course, an elevator would be helpful, but we really didn't have any place to put an elevator in the footprint, because if you think about the first floor of this building, it's really just an open banking hall. It always was. So we didn't want to shrink that space or violate that space with an elevator shaft. So we started aiming our efforts towards talking with Licking County Foundation about the potential of purchasing one of the adjacent buildings. We had another code issue, which was the existing stair is a nice open stair, but doesn't afford any protection from fire and smoke. But we didn't want to enclose it in a way that would change the character of the original stair. So we also suggested to them, along with an elevator to get up and down in the building, we should also maybe have a fire-rated stair that would meet code. So the discussions then turned to, could we acquire an adjacent building and combine that building or that site with the Louis Sullivan building? And the long story short is the Licking County Foundation was successful in acquiring a 10 West Main Street building, which we are now utilizing as part of this project to locate a new elevator and a new fire-rated stair.
With all the plans in place, the interior is ready to be renovated, which brings us to today. As of now, the building sits and waits until work can resume, bringing this beautiful building back to its former glory. A very special thanks to Daryl Rogers of Krajnak and Connie Hawk of the Licking County Foundation for all of their help with this video. If you'd like to show your support for the project, the Licking County Foundation is still accepting donations to help pay for interior restorations. You can find a link down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.